So then let's move on to social.
Absolutely.
So what are some things that come up for you?
Oh my goodness, this is such a huge piece. So a couple of things we know for sure. One is that, as I expressed earlier, this kind of loaded gun theory, or the idea that losing weight below a certain set point may actually switch on the genetic manifestation of an eating disorder, particularly for anorexia. So we know that dieting, okay, can definitely be a factor there. Okay, we know that from the starvation research that was done during World War II, we know that just by the act of losing weight, whether you intend to or not, you can get obsessed around food. So we know the biology around that. And if you think about then, okay, socially what's going on, in our culture right now, the ideal female body is getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. And I was at a conference, I don't know, there was a presenter who looked at the BMI. The BMI is just, for this height, what is the weight for this person? Right. It's just a one measure of how big people are tall and on the scale. And they unfortunately chose to look at the covers of Sports Illustrated models. But they looked over, the last 2 or 3 decades of Sports Illustrated models, and they saw that their BMI went down significantly. So in other words, what we used to see as the ideal woman's body being more voluptuous possibly, to what we now consider to be the ideal body has just gotten thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. And this isn't only in the last 20 or 30 years. So if you've got that as the ideal body that you need to be in order to be loved, in order to be loved, in order to be successful, in order to find the love of your life, then we're pushing ourselves to conform to that. We want to look like that because we're told that's going to give you more success. So hence what do? We go on a diet. Yeah. So there's more and more and more and more of a diet culture as we're kind of going with or holding on to this ideal of a smaller body as being ideal.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, nowadays with social media especially, we're just
prolific.
Inundated. Yeah.
Inundated.
With these unrealistic images for what, especially women's bodies should look like, but men's too.
Men's too, and unfortunately we're seeing such an uptick for the guys out there as well, with this kind of ideal guy's body, all buff and, the 6-pack, or even if you can even get more in there, that's the 12-pack. I don't even know if that exists. And so we're seeing a lot more of the guys, unfortunately, really struggling with that. But if you think of the persuasiveness of visual images around us, right, we know that advertising works because companies spend a fortune on advertising because it works, even if we are not cognitively aware that it's working, right? Yeah. And so if you think of all this imagery proliferated on steroids, as Megan was saying, through social media, and then we add on that the Photoshop component, which is also, I think, a relatively newer thing because of the way technology has evolved over the last 10 or 15 years, then it's just a recipe for disaster because we've basically got these people that are supposedly real but are more of an avatar, i.e. more of an artificial construct, and we're saying that this is the perfect ideal woman's body or guy's body. Go out there, people, and be the best you can be.
Right. And we know with advertising, and media, the whole point is to say you are not good enough, right? Yes. You are not good enough as you are. What you should look like is this, because you know what that does? It sells things, right? It makes us say, oh, I feel shame, I feel inadequate. Yes. But maybe if I go out there and buy that, product or dress or juice cleanse or then I'll find happiness. Then I'll be able to protect myself from pain.
That's right. Protect myself from pain. I'll be lovable. Yeah. Etc. Yeah. And the world will be a rosy place. And you know what? Again, referencing this conference I was at last week, they actually did a screening for a new film. That's a documentary exactly about the marketing industry, and it's exactly about what you were saying about the idea that in order to sell products, ideally we make people feel insecure, so then they look to a product or a service to then meet that need, right, or meet that fear or meet that insecurity. The film's called The Illusionist, and I have to say it is extremely disturbing, so I would caution people who are maybe in a vulnerable place around body and body image, that it may or may not be a great thing to watch. But if you're feeling pretty solid and you've got some supportive people around you, or even just for your loved ones to watch it. I mean, it blew my mind. Again, we know a lot of this stuff, but when you see it in such a concentrated way that it's presented in this documentary, it makes you kind of sick.
You know? Okay, I'll have to check that out.
Yep.
Yeah. So, just any more sort of social contributors? Like one that's coming up for me is, like sort of family culture. So, you know, the culture of thinness that is so pervasive in certain families and really gets passed down essentially.
Yeah.
And the modeling behavior that occurs. Like, you know, I come from a family where thinness is really valued. And some of my earliest memories are my mom like kind of stepping on the scale, stepping off the scale, stepping on the scale, stepping off the scale. Or, you know, my stepmom for 15 years, the 15 years she was in my family, like always being on a diet, like always on some sort of diet, right? So like, you know, for me, that was really impactful because the, you know, awareness that I gained from that was like, oh, well, you know, you must be thin to be loved, right? Or to be desirable, or that's what it is to be a woman. So, you know, I'm wondering for you if that's something you notice with your clients, Melainie, is this kind of like the culture of thinness.
Absolutely.
Health.
Absolutely. I think you've hit upon two things there. One is the family culture for sure, right? And we definitely see this. You know, maybe the family is trying to be uber healthy, you know, and so the intention behind it is really good. Yeah. But again, it can be taken to the extreme.
Right.
So we definitely see a lot of that. We definitely see a lot of, more often the mums, because again, that's their culture, right? The ideal woman has to look like this. So we have a lot of mums who are trying to look like the ideal, eat like the ideal, exercise like the ideal, and then they're instilling that, either they're directly instilling it on their daughters or their sons, or the kids are just picking up on it anyway because it's there. So we definitely see that. And then something else that we see is what we actually call intergenerational eating disorders, where we've got family members who actually have their own eating disorder, never been treated, never maybe even being diagnosed, maybe never being acknowledged, but it's just normal that after every dinner, a client was telling me today, it was normal that after every dinner, mum would get up from the dinner table and go and throw up, and we heard her throw up, and that was just normal since she was a baby.
Wow.
That's called an intergenerational eating disorder, and the difficulty there is if the parent doesn't get help and treatment, the kid grows up not only with the genetic vulnerability of developing an eating disorder, but with a culture that kind of normalizes this behaviour and says this is just how it is.
Exactly.
You know, this is how you control your weight. So it's pretty intense stuff.
And indirectly related to that, again, coming back to kind of the family system, is the culture around emotions, right? Because what we talked about was, you know, from the psychological perspective, eating disorders being a way of coping with difficult feelings. So if you grow up in a family where you're told not to cry, not to feel, not to be weak, you know, anxiety, it's all in your head, just snap out of it, all these sorts of things, then again, there's a culture around suppressing, numbing, avoiding emotions. And what are you going to do if that's your coping mechanism? You're going to turn to an eating disorder.
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the head there. And again, I like to draw parallels with, you know, substance abuse industry and alcoholism, because those alcoholism and the treatment of alcoholism and substance abuse has led the way for where we are with eating disorder treatment, where it's eating disorders and the treatment of eating disorders is relatively new, whereas treatment of substance abuse and alcoholism has been around a little bit longer, so we can learn from them. You know, what we've seen there is speaking about emotions and suppressing emotions. So if your family says it's not okay to cry, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of our men in particular were raised no crying, right? Boys don't cry, right? We've heard this. And then if you look at the rates of alcoholism, there's far more alcoholism in guys than there is in women. Now, I'm not saying it's not in women. It absolutely is. But we do see a higher prevalence in men. Versus we see a high prevalence right now of eating disorders in women than in guys. So I guess what I'm saying is that we're seeing both genders or anyone on the spectrum with their sexual identity trying to cope with different emotions and embracing possibly what's an accepted way of dealing with those emotions, whether it be out boozing with the boys or it might be dieting with the girls. And I'm being very, very binary here, or very, you know what I mean, generic or generalising, but just to kind of capture the essence of what we're talking about and the messages we get from a society, culturally, and also from our own families.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. And I'm just thinking a couple of more that come up for me,
Yeah.
which may be more around like just all across the biopsychosocial spectrum, are one, bullying, you know, and especially bullying around weight,
Yes.
And size or appearance, and that can also occur, you know, in relationships, like I said, abusive relationships and whatnot, and emotional abuse and things that occur with that, and then also disconnection. So if a person feels really socially disconnected, again, I mean, certainly it all comes back to the same place around like dealing with the uncomfortable feelings of loneliness or, you know, ostracization or rejection or heartbreak or whatever. And then, of course, in the case of bullying, there's a more traumatic, more of a trauma component, I should say. But yeah, just around like the kind of, they sort of come up for me around the social component, you know, the lack of connection, basically, or the traumatizing connection.
Absolutely. I think you really hit upon it there, Megan. And we know actually with bullying, there's a very high association of bullying with kids who might be what their peers deem them to be a little bit overweight.
Right.
So this kind of fat shaming.
Yes.
Excuse me if you see a little white
yeah.
fluffy dog jump up here. It's my puppy who's going to join us for the rest of this video. But what we see there is, so fat shaming. And there's actually been a study done where they asked kids, I think they were in elementary school, what they would rather have. Would they rather be disabled and in a wheelchair, or would they rather be overweight? And the kids would rather be disabled or have lost a limb than be overweight, is what that study showed us, which was just heartbreaking, but also shows you, again, the family stuff, the social stuff, that we are so like being in a larger body, and we're not even talking about big bodies, but not being the thin ideal, then it's unacceptable, and actually it's even more than unacceptable, it's disgusting. And we're going to taunt and tease and bully you and let you know that, you know, you're just disgusting and not acceptable. So I totally agree with you there. And we're seeing a larger percentage of kids who've been bullied in the future develop binge eating disorder, actually, which is very, very interesting. And another stat that came out is around this fear of being larger or not the thin ideal, is we see that the more that kids are dieting in elementary school, the higher the risk is that they'll actually develop not just an eating disorder, but compulsive overeating and binge eating. So they're kind of opposite of what supposedly they're wanting to do or trying to do, which is fit a slim ideal, and then they end up with this deprivation that leads to an overconsumption. And for many of our clients who have compulsive overeating or binge eating disorder, there is often a weight component that then goes along with that, which is taking you further and further away from this thin ideal. And that's my puppy Miley giving us lots of kisses. She's our little therapy dog.
That's interesting, Melainie, too, because I was reading an article today on yo-yo dieting, essentially, and how actually it causes weight gain, right?
Absolutely.
And, you know, even more so in people who are already in what they termed lean bodies, so perhaps people who we might not, they might not be on an overweight, you know, on the BMI or whatever we traditionally believe to be like an overweight body. But, you know, for so many people out there who are thinking like, oh, I just need to lose those last, like, you know, X pounds and just need to, you know, get my summer body or whatever. And really medically, like, there's absolutely no reason for them to lose weight. For those people, dieting actually triggers ultimate weight gain, because again, the body goes into that place where they're going to end up, you know, with binge eating. Essentially.
Absolutely. It's so counter. And I wanted to pick up on something there that we were just both saying. You know, there is an assumption, and there has long been an assumption, particularly in my industry. So I'm a registered dietitian, that not being of a normal weight means that you're unhealthy, and the further you are away from that normal weight or BMI or whatever measurement we're using, the unhealthier you are. And that actually, to some degree, if not to a very large degree, is actually not true.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to say, what?
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe you can actually just say that again, Melainie, because I know that for me, when I became aware of this, like, it was like, what? Like,
Yeah.
no, what?
How is this true? So we're told that the larger your body is, and therefore supposedly the more body fat you have,
mm-hmm.
the unhealthier you are, and you therefore are not choosing a healthy life, and you're
mm-hmm.
not taking care of yourself, yada yada. What in fact we now know is that if we have, I'm going to use a model as an example, a slim model, and we know now that they've cut the degree of thinness in
mm-hmm.
Italy, especially. They said, models any thinner than this, I mean, they're a walking disaster in the sense of the rate of heart attack and death is very
mm-hmm.
high. So let's say we've got a model of a BMI of 18 who smokes, who doesn't exercise, who smokes to keep her appetite suppressed, and that's about it. So you run the numbers on that person. That person visually is thin. We associate thinness with healthy. That person is so not healthy, right? No exercise, eats nothing, and smokes. And then we have a person over here whose BMI might be, 25. They might be considered what the medical industry would say overweight or even obese. But they work out every day, they take care of themselves, they eat well, and they have a larger body. That person actually could be, and probably is,
mm-hmm.
actually very, very healthy.
Yeah.
So we have this misconception, and it's been totally accepted and run with to the point of distortion, that you can tell how healthy someone is by their body
mm-hmm.
size
mm-hmm.
and shape.
And that if somebody is overweight, it means they're unhealthy.
That's right.
So what we're really saying here
true.
is being overweight does not make a person unhealthy. And in fact, many times people who are overweight are much healthier than people who are underweight or normal weight. And, especially from like a hormonal perspective and things as well. I mean, there's, as soon as women in particular, when we get under a certain weight that we're supposed to be, it messes with our hormones.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Which messes with everything.
Absolutely.
And metabolism, everything like that.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, Melainie, I mean, this has all been so helpful. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of, like, that we didn't cover in terms of what causes an eating disorder from a biopsychosocial perspective?
I think we covered the vast majority of things. I guess what I want to say is that we're still learning all the time because the research is still so new. And I feel like every year we add or learn something
mm-hmm.
new, which helps us, to figure out how do we treat eating disorders
mm-hmm.
more effectively.
Totally, and it's so complex that every individual is different, right?
They are.
Just because a friend of yours who might have gone through something similar recovered in a certain way and you're having more troubles recovering, it doesn't mean that you're not smart enough or dedicated enough or good enough or, that you're a failure. I mean, they're so complex, so
Absolutely.
Keep that in mind.
I think so, and I think my last words would be, many of our clients fear that they won't ever recover,
mm-hmm.
they won't ever get better, and they're afraid that if they try, they'll fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that, the majority of people fully recover from an eating disorder. I mean, I think we're living proof of that. And for those who don't necessarily get to the place where body image and food is completely neutral, you get a hell of a lot closer to it anyway,
Totally.
So a hell of a lot better than what it is currently. And so I really encourage people to know that you're more resilient than you think you are,
mm-hmm.
you're stronger than you think you are, but that's why it's so essential to get a really good treatment team around you, because you just can't do this on your own. Or I guess some people do, but my God, it's miserable. And it takes so much longer. And that's, I would say that the people who struggle and never truly get over their eating disorder, there's a larger percentage of people who fall into that category mm-hmm. who didn't reach out for help. So it's one of those things where you have to be a bit counterintuitive and say, okay, help me.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you, Melainie, for all your wisdom.
You're most welcome, Megan. Thank you.